Welcome to another episode of Higher Learning. I am your host, Oz Rashid. Today, we are joined by Shashank Shekhar. He is the founder and CEO of InstaMortgage. Shashank, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Oz. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am so excited to talk. Higher Learning has been on for almost 100 plus episodes now. We're always talking to, executives, founders who are shaping their industry, disrupting industry, changing their companies. We want to understand what they uniquely see in talent that others don't. And I want to talk a little bit about the future of work. So we have a lot to get to today. What I'm really excited about is I love talking to entrepreneurs and understanding their entrepreneurial journey. So I want to start there. You moved here, right? I believe from India, and you almost knew one, and you built this ultra successful tech company in the mortgage space. So let's start there. Was this always the plan? Did you always know that you wanted to come to the US? Did you fall into it? And then how did you kind of get started kind of going into the actual mortgage and housing industry?
Yeah, sometimes strange things happen, not exactly per plan, and hopefully audience can relate to that. There's sometimes things happen in life, and if you had just chosen one versus the other, the entire life trajectory would have been something else. And that's the kind of thing that happened for me coming to the US first, is because I went to one of the top business schools in India, went to work for GE Consumer Finance after that. And my entire thing is most people who come to the US, especially from India, are typically software engineers. They come here in H-1B, work for a tech company in Silicon Valley. I don't have any software engineering background, so I was never even thinking about coming to the US because I was always like, that's not going to be an opportunity. Not to say that I would have said no if that was to happen, but not nowhere on the roadmap. My wife again went to business school and majored in marketing with no software engineering background. So neither of us ever thought that we'll come to the US to work per se. And then we worked for a startup. So moved from GE Consumer Finance to another company that was actually in the mortgage space here in the US, but most of its operations was in India. And there too, I became head of operations after a couple of years. And they were looking for head of business here in the US, where the company was headquartered in Mountain View, California. And they tried looking for someone for almost 6 months and just could not find anyone that was suitable enough. And then finally, the president and CEO, they were like, oh, Shashank has been with us for a couple of years. He understands the business better than anyone else. Why don't we transfer him to the US? So all of this happened. As I said, this was not planned. This was not something that I thought would ever happen. And then once I came to the US, I thought, oh, this is great. I mean, I get to work in Silicon Valley. It's a VC funded company. Everything was looking great. And then I came here in 2006, and very soon I could see all the cracks in the mortgage industry. And it was end of 2007 that my boss, who was the president then, I was head of business. He calls me into his office and say, hey, we are shutting down the operation because we are not getting funding anymore. And not something that was completely unexpected at that point in time. I saw it coming. And so when that company shut down, one of the things that even when I was in business school, I used to tell my friends is that, look, I'm in business school. One big reason is because I want to start my own business one day. And so as the luck would have it, now I was sitting in the US, 18 months here in the country with no connections, no savings. But I was like, maybe all of this led to what I wanted to do all the time, all of this time, which was to start my own business. So that's how I got in the mortgage business, because that's the only thing I knew. And even though the year was 2008 and mortgage was probably the dirtiest word on the planet because the entire financial crisis was being blamed on the mortgage industry. And so there were a lot of headwinds. As I said, I was new to the country. I had no connections or capital, but still, this is something I wanted to do for a long period of time. And I thought maybe that's just maybe it's a I would take that as a stroke of luck or a stroke of destiny that I have nothing to fall back on. Of course, I could have just gone back to India and joined corporate India back, but thought, let's give it a shot. Maybe all of this led to something that was destined to happen, and that's where InstaMortgage started.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to be in an industry that in 2008, or in that timing, in terms of what was going on in the country, it couldn't have been an area you probably wanted to stay further away from. And I just find it interesting that some of the most successful companies from a market cap perspective are really the companies that were born in some of these most uncertain times. If you look at Google and Amazon, well, they came out of the dot-com bubble burst, right? If you look at even Uber and Airbnb, a lot of their success came after the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. So you are doing what everybody would say is kind of the counter viewpoint and going into an industry that, at the time was probably not the space that people want to move into. And you've had some real success. And the company has won numerous awards. You've beaten out bigger brands like Zoom and Pinterest to win some of these awards. I'm always interested to hear about how you build that type of culture. What do you attribute that to? And maybe is there an award that stands out that you're most proud of?
So there's probably not one reason for a company to be successful. As you know, us there are multiple reasons for that. But culture, you use the word which is probably the closest to my heart when it comes to say building a successful company, is because a lot of other things are could be technical skills, could be the kind of people you hire, but the kind of culture that you build, you can do everything right and you get your culture wrong and nothing happens. And you could have a lot of things not going your way, but culture being strong, and you can plow through a lot of rough times. And that's what I think we have achieved at InstaMortgage. And one thing that I'm probably most proud of is the culture that we have built here, where there's a lot of ownership in the organization for people who work here. There is fortunately for me, there's a lot of loyalty. The first employee that I hired in 2009, 2010, she still works with me. The second employee that I hired a couple of years later. So employee number one, employee number two, those people are still with me after all these years. And I think it's because we have built a culture where there's a lot of ownership that stays with the individuals. So I, as a leader, I'm not a micromanager, because my philosophy has always been is that if I need to micromanage you, then you shouldn't be part of the team in the first place. And so if that's if you give them that kind of ownership, if you empower them that way, they somehow they start in the better they start believing that they are part of the organization. And even when they do something wrong, I remember when I was probably making $4,000 or $5,000 a month, nothing more. And one of my first employees made a mistake which cost me $8,000 or $9,000. That's 2 months of my salary or income, and I still did not say a word. This was a genuine mistake, and even though it could have been avoided, it was not something she genuinely did. And I was like, mistakes happen. That's fine. Just make sure you don't repeat it the next time. And people see that. When people see that, they become very confident. They take up more responsibilities, and I think that's been the reason why we have probably won more awards more than probably any other mortgage company that I'm aware of. You mentioned where we beat Zoom and Pinterest and Square on Deloitte Fast Tech list. And that's unique for us. No mortgage company has ever won a Deloitte Fast Tech, has been on the Deloitte Fast Tech 500, is because it's technically a tech company list. Mortgage companies don't win that because some of the biggest companies in Silicon Valley and in the world, they get to win the Deloitte Fast Tech. It's a technology company list. And we didn't just win it because of our innovation in technology, but as you said, we ranked higher than Zoom in a pandemic year, which, if you know, Zoom was probably the biggest household name that happened during the pandemic because of what happened. So we have won the Inc. Award twice in the top 500. So Inc. 500, we won the Financial Times fastest growing mortgage company and the second fastest growing financial services company in all of the America, so South and North American continent combined. So there are some really big awards, other than, of course, all the top of a lot of industry awards that we have won. So it's hard to point out which is the favorite. We have won Stevie's for 3 years in a row. So we are very proud of it. But more than that, I think what matters to us is that you don't work for awards. You work for what you're building. But award is a motivation. I would not discount that. When what you're doing, you get validation from such large organizations and associations that believe what you're doing is better than most in the industry. It does inspire you. It does motivate you to do better work. So yeah, we don't work for awards, but we love what we're getting. Deloitte Fast Tech is probably, just because it was so hard to get it and the rank that we achieved there, I would probably borderline call it my favorite, even though all of them was I mean, comes from the team on what they have delivered. And so each one of them is special for us.
Yeah, I mean, those are fantastic accomplishments. Any company would be lucky to have that. And I think the thing that's amazing about that is other people see that and they want to come work at your company. They want to be part of that culture, right? And listen, our company's been around since 2011. My first, second, and third employees still work there too. So maybe that's a sign of a great culture. I'm interested. What do you do to make sure that the culture is imbued day to day, week to week? Because it's an ecosystem, it's an evolving organism, right? And the minute you think you have it all set is when things can go off the rails. So, what are some of the techniques in terms of making sure that the culture is understood on a day to day, week to week basis?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's you have to the culture has to be driven from the top. You can't make a fake culture where you expect the people to follow a certain culture and then you as the CEO do not follow the same thing. So if you say, for example, that you want to build an organization with less bureaucracy or flat organizational structure, what that means is that if someone comes to you asking for a solution or a question, you should not be thinking, I'm the CEO, this is not my job. But just the other day, you said, it's the company runs with no bureaucracy or an open door policy. And that's what I see with a lot of leaders is that they talk about some of these things, but when it comes to deliver on those things, they'll be like, why don't you go and talk to your branch manager? Why don't you go talk to your VP and then come to me? I'm not saying you have to not follow the protocol, but if things were raised all the way to you, then as because you are the ones driving the culture and you are the one talking about it, you have to walk that talk from that perspective. Also, I think leading from constant improvement and deep sympathy as something which is entwined together is very important. Is because either some of the leaders they just lead with the fact that you need to constantly improve. If you only do that without any sympathy, you become this annoying boss that nobody wants to work with because you're constantly trying to pressurize people into delivering, constantly trying to pressurize people into constantly improving, but there's no sympathy attached to it, meaning there's no empathy. You're not empathizing with that employee when they have a need for something. On the other hand, if you are a very soft leader and all you do is lead with empathy and nothing else, then you are doing disservice both to that person because you're not helping them grow, and to the organization, of course, because you're not helping the organization. All you're trying to do is win a popularity contest at that point in time. So I think this and the fact that the both of that, the culture of constant improvement yet of deep empathy to our people's need, that's what drives the culture. That's what creates that ownership mentality where you're not looking at, oh, Shashank is the owner and all of us are employees. Each one of them feel the ownership in the organization to whatever consumer experience that we want to deliver. That does not just become my job or sales job or operations job. It becomes a job for everyone, and that's why you see even our customer ratings on when online sites are so high is because not because I drive the culture or one person or one department drives the culture. It because everyone works with the same aim, which is to deliver this that great customer experience that we want. So I think that's probably a combination, at least in my experience, that has been the combination of what I said before, is that give them a lot of independence, let them make the mistake, and they will learn from it, but that will also help them grow as an individual. I've hired people, my employee number two, even employee number one, when they came to InstaMortgage, they knew 10% of what they're doing right now. And in 2 or 3 years, they grew as an individual. They grew as a professional. They were able to do things they were not ever trained for. They did not ever go to college for. They have never done in their life. In fact, they would never imagine that they could be this grown self, say 4 or 5 years later, working here. And that's the goal, is that even if you leave the organization, you leave as a better individual, as a better professional than you came here, as you came here. And those are some of the goals that we work with. And that's what I think drives the culture here.
Fantastic. And that could be a tough needle to thread in terms of either empathy or high performance. I know I've probably gone too far one way or another at different points of the company. In fact, I would say over the last few years, I probably leaned a little bit more into that empathy without driving the high performance culture. And that's something as we've brought in new people that we've gotten better at and we've seen the results from it. So not easy to do, but I can certainly understand why that's so important. Now let's talk a little bit about you as an entrepreneur. So you've had a lot of success, you've had a lot of wins. We talked a little bit about the awards, but I don't just want this to be a show about all the successful things I've done and all the images that can seem like. I want to talk a little bit about the adversity, about the failures. So is there anything that you can tell me about, maybe it's particularly if you have a people or culture decision that you got wrong, and what did it teach you going forward?
Yeah, multiple failures. Really, I think just the decision to start a mortgage business in 2008 was stupid to begin with. So just the seed of it or the genesis of the business was really, if I was looking from outside in, I would be like, you must be completely crazy to do it. And yes, it turned out well, but it could have very well turned out to be to on the opposite side of it. So while sometimes you have to be brave and take a decision against the grain, sometimes you also have to be logical. So again, that's probably one thing that I did not probably look at all the aspects of it before diving into it. But in terms of people failure, really, there have been, especially one thing that comes to my mind is a very big partnership. I for a long period of time kind of struggled with this thought that I don't have a co-founder or somebody that I can talk to, and it'll be great to have a partner in the business, so to say, somebody that has equity in the company, somebody who I can brainstorm with. And with that need, I brought someone into the organization, and I think that was and after a point, after about a year or so, we realized that this was not working, and we had to break that partnership. And that was a failure at my end in not understanding, not doing the due diligence the way I should have, not understanding that we were two different individuals with two different goals. And that can happen whether you're hiring an employee, and that has happened with employees as well, where we have hired. I told you before is that micromanaging is not the way I lead, and I've had people where I had to micromanage, and at that point of time, I had to let them go because it wasn't a right fit for the organization. So all of this, and this is a great question, by the way, because you don't want to get into what is called success syndrome, right? You're listening to someone like me and thinking that everything that Shashank did was successful. In fact, there are very few things that I did was successful. There were more failures than success. Thankfully, in a long period of time, it's the law of averages play out, and then thankfully, in my case, the decisions that I took which were more successful, kind of overrode the decisions were failures. But yeah, hiring wrong people, getting into a partnership where I should not have, trying to be really desperate about having that co-founder thing, thinking that that will be a great thing. That didn't pan out, and there were even some of the some from a business projection perspective is that sometimes what you projected, some of the marketing spend that you committed to and delivered on is not something that you should have done. And looking back on it, I mean, this is the I think the most important part is not the failures itself. Of course, you should fail fast, but what you learned from it. So now that if I go into the same kind of experiences or same kind of decision making, I'm wiser per se. So it's as I say, is that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger is the important part. As long as it makes you stronger, that's the important part. But if it kills you, then that's the problem there. And so I've learned a lot from all those mistakes from the first 12 months where I was like, what was I thinking to start a mortgage business in this year when I had no connections and questioning myself? Because some people are, oh, you must be very visionary to think about it to start a business like that. But most of the days you are just questioning yourself. Really, as a solo founder, it's a lonely place sometimes. And you're like, why would I do that? But then you also go back, wake up the next day and say, oh, let's figure this thing out, right? Let's make it happen. Let's come up with a new strategy. So whether it's people failure, it's the strategies failures, all of that, as long as you're learning from it, I think that's the most important part. And understand that that will be part of the journey. What I mean, even if you are super successful already, you're just thinking of starting that journey tomorrow, that you should be ready. Your mindset should be that I will probably get more failures than success. And how do I ride through and what do I learn from that?
Yeah, professional success isn't about absence of failure as much as it is learning from that failure. You took the
Right.
words right out
Right.
of my mouth,
Yep.
and being able to adapt and be able to, be able to get other swings at the bat. Because really, what it comes down to being an entrepreneur is staying in the game as long as possible, right? And allowing yourself the opportunity to learn from those mistakes and to capitalize on opportunities as they come up. So, yeah, it's never the storybook that's written that you take after the fact. Another quote I love is that I think it was Elon Musk who said, being an entrepreneur is like chewing glass and staring into the abyss. And so that is a very apt one there as well. Let's talk a little bit about something that is really the topic du jour, professionally, socially, and it's artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
And you have a company by the name of Insta AI.
Mhm.
And what I'm most interested to hear about from you, but really what I talk about with a lot of people, is the future of work and what AI's role is in how people do their jobs and how it's going to change companies and industries. What are the things that you feel most certain about that is coming up in terms of the near future, in terms of work and the professional workforce and AI's role?
Yeah, really good question is because yeah, I think we are looking at a dramatically different kind of work just a few months down the road. Of course, it's a slow progression, so sometimes you don't see the change because it happens so slowly. With AI, it'll probably happen a little faster than most people are thinking. I One thing for sure is that what we see with AI is that there are a lot of roles that are going to get eliminated dramatically, so to say, and that's something that the workforce needs to be AI ready. So I think I see a future where the gap is going to be much bigger. There are people who are still trying to figure out what this is, how will this impact, and my worry is that some people might just be too late to it, thinking of this as something which will not be that radical or dramatic, and then you create that AI information gap where some people are trained for the next level of workforce while some other people are not. Also, the other thing that will happen from a leader or a manager perspective is that you won't just be managing human employees, you'll be managing AI employees. I mean, with agentic AI, a lot of work that's being done by human now will be done by AI agents, and so it becomes very difficult to think about that. So far, all you were trained on is that how do you manage human employees, and now you have agentic AI or AI agents who are doing a lot of work, and you have digital employees, so to say, or AI employees, and you have human employees, and how do you work through that? Also, the challenge that will happen internally is when people become wary of losing their jobs, or people become wary of their jobs being curtailed at some point in time. That change management becomes huge. I mean, we have gone through those probably every 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, it started with industrial revolution to now AI revolution, where every couple of decades we have had a technology that dramatically made a shift to how work is done. And at that period of time, the role of leaders in people management becomes even more important, guiding them through the new world where they might be, as I said, there might be a scared, there might be insecurity into what does this mean. So we at InstaMortgage, I mean, InstaAI is was a Gen AI platform that we built, and for us, the reason for building it was to make our sales force even more efficient and better than where the competition is. So we were taking it as an augmentation of human intelligence, of augmentation of what human productivity can do, and enhance it even more, and make them even better salespeople than who they are, or make them even better marketing professionals. So that's how we see as AI, but that's where I see the future of work with AI, with agentic AI coming in, and a lot of work being done by AI. That eliminates a lot of role. You can look at it from a positive perspective too, Oz, where you can see that a lot of routine work, things that you probably don't get excited about when you wake up in the morning and want to do, those are some of the works that could be delegated, so to say, to AI. And you could be looking at doing more strategic work, more where human brain gets challenged even more than doing a lot of for the doing a lot of work that is more clerical and something that you probably don't enjoy doing in the first place. So it will be turbulent times for leaders to figure out how to work through it. But those are some of my early thoughts on how AI is going to change the future of work.
Finding the right talent for your team doesn't have to be a struggle. Meet Aon Hire, the world's first hiring experience management platform designed to transform the way you hire. Powered by AI, Aon Hire takes the hassle out of every step in the process. From smart resume analysis to customized interview questions, it saves you time, money, and effort. Plus, with real-time insights from every interview, you can quickly identify top candidates, reduce turnover, and stay on budget. And forget about note-taking, Aon Hire takes care of that for you. Ready to revolutionize your hiring process? Visit aonhire.com and get started today.
I was going to say that I think agentic AI, one of the things that stands out to me the most about it is the amount of productivity we're going to get. You know, right now we live in these constraints of these 9 to 5 hours, and business is going to be going at all times with agentic AI. And like, you'll come in and work will be done when you get there. And I agree with you. I think roles are going to very much change, but it's going to take away a lot of the administrative tasks that, we're just busy work anyway. And I think we're going to be able to see that people are going to be able to do their best work and have more purpose. But to your point, there might be some short-term disruption there that, as we're kind of figuring everything out as leaders and as companies, that we're going to see. I guess my question for you would be, if somebody is worried about their role getting replaced, what advice would you give them? Or what might you tell your kids about professions to choose, or what areas might be areas to focus on going forward?
Yeah. So first, I mean, you touched upon a great point there, Oz, that I want to just double click on that, and then I'll come to your question here, which is the fact that the leaders and managers will have to think about their KPIs again. It's very important is that if you're coming in the morning and the agentic AI or the AI agents have done some of the works, understand that we have a very time equals productivity kind of a mindset that we have had as humans forever throughout the human evolution, even through industrial revolution. The more work you put in, the more work you got done. It's this combination of the fact that you have AI employees now or digital employees and human employees. You have to rethink that entire KPI thing where does it actually mean that you need 8 hours of work to give this productivity, or can you work better in terms of having that synergistic relationship with AI where you are managing that kind of employee better, where you are able to get more done in less hours of work. So this number of hours spent equals productivity to a certain extent. I think we need to rethink that mindset, where the employee productivity is not just about you spent 8 hours here, you must be a great employee. You spent 10 hours here, oh wow, you're burning the midnight candle, so to say, and that's a great thing. So all of those need to be rethought, and the faster the companies are able to do it, the better those company will be, and that's where I think it's AI is also a great leveler from the perspective of a smaller companies have an opportunity, which they didn't have for a long period of time, is because there were much bigger companies and you could potentially not compete with them. AI does provide that great leveler, even for challenger brands, even for smaller companies, because if you're agile, if you are nimble, you are able to get ahead of some of these things that we are talking about, while larger company may actually have a bigger problem in terms of changing their KPIs, changing their work culture, changing their mindset, because it's such a large organization with legacy. So, because you brought such a great point, I thought I will just delve a little deeper into it. But in terms of talking about people who are have the insecurity or scared of their job losing, that's why I was saying the AI knowledge gap. We need to bridge that pretty quickly. If you think you are in that bucket, by the way, everyone is probably in that bucket. But really, one of the things that, especially with kids, I have an 11-year-old, and what I'm working with her is not so much about you need to learn about AI, you need to learn about certain things, but you need to learn about things, first of all, that will be hard for AI to replace. Right? I mean, it's some of the software skills on people management. We talked about deep empathy before, right? So those things, the consultative nature of the humans, relationship building. How do you handle? We talked about some of the facts about how do you handle adversity. Some of these things are irreplaceable, and these skills need to be built by for the kids very early. So if you are an audience and listening, and you have younger kids, those are the skills I'll focus on more. And then the analytical part of it, as in if you again, they don't have to get into a STEM, but understanding math, for example, is an essential skill because it teaches you to be analytical. It teaches you to understand the world, whichever way the world goes tomorrow. So, my really big thing to my kid is that you don't have to decide what you want to become tomorrow, but you have to build the skills for whatever happens tomorrow. And that's, I think, focus on the skills more than career is what is important. And if you're already grown up, and if you're already in the in a work environment like say Oz and I are, then you have to be bridging that AI knowledge gap very quickly. Especially if you're in a field, as I said, if you're in a field that can be taken over by AI, or most of the work can be done by AI pretty quickly, then you should be off the races very soon if you're not doing that already. And the great thing is that, I mean, this is 2025. You can go from, I mean, I went from knowing nothing about AI. Again, as I mentioned before, I have no software engineering background. I know nothing about technology per se, building technology. So knowing nothing to, I know the first course I attended was just on basic chat GPT, paid $97 to do it. And 9 months later, I had built probably one of the most powerful Gen AI platforms that was there. I didn't code it because, again, I did not become a coder per se. But this just teaches you the fact that you can go from knowing nothing to understanding very deep nuances of artificial intelligence by teaching yourself. You should be open to it. You should be passionate about it, of course. But there's so many free tools or so many inexpensive tools that you can spend your money on or just time on. and learned so many things. So those are probably my two big advice for people who are in middle and high school and will be the workforce for tomorrow, and then people who are already part of the workforce now.
I love that. The buzzword of the day in Silicon Valley is agency, but that's what this comes down to. Your agency to want to go learn these things, to learn these new tools, to spend time and money learning, getting up to speed on these resources. Fantastic advice. We're giving parenting advice here. We're giving professional advice. There's laughs. The Higher Learning Podcast has it all. Let's talk a little bit about hiring and the people that you bring into your organization. Let's start here. Do you have a core hiring philosophy for people that you bring into InstaMortgage?
Yeah. So the core hiring philosophy is remains. I mean, the philosophy is driven almost 100% by culture. We talked about it before. Is that when I'm interviewing someone, the only thing that I'm looking at is, yes, you need to have basic skills. Yes, you need to be able to perform your job. But what I'm looking for, and that's what I said before, is that a culture mismatch is probably the worst thing that you can do in terms of hiring. Everything else to a reasonable person with reasonable skill can be taught. And so, whether it's my employee number one or employee number two who came with very little experience of what they ended up actually doing, and in terms of growing into the job, that's what you're looking for. So, our hiring philosophy has always been the fact that you need to be culturally aligned with the single-minded focus that we have here at InstaMortgage, which is to deliver the highest level of consumer experience that we can. And that in itself entails multiple things, because it's not just a question of, as I said, skill. Is that then that means that when things go wrong, are you able to handle it? Will you take the ownership of saying it's a problem that I need to solve, and not come back tomorrow and said there was nobody that I could go to for this problem to be solved? And that's why we empower our individuals so much. So for us, hiring has been mostly about that culture match. And again, as I said before, it's not always that we get it right, because it's difficult to do that in say a 30-minute interview or a 45 minutes interview. And that's why you need to be looking at how they perform in situations like that, especially in the first couple of weeks. And sometimes you have to let them go very, very quickly, is because they're not just impacting themselves or the close people around it, they're impacting the culture of the organization. And so sometimes you have to take that tough call. And it's not a good fit for them as well. They're not going to thrive in a culture like this, which is very, as I said, a culture that empowers you, because you will always be looking at, where is my manager? Where's the other person that I need to get help from? And so that's our overarching philosophy when we are recruiting or hiring.
I love that. Do you have maybe a favorite question you like to ask in interviews that you find to be very revealing?
I think the approach to interview that I've always had is not so much ask about success, but actually ask about failures. So asking not questions about what are your strengths, because I'm sure people have great answers about that, but what are your weaknesses? Again, not asking, and I'm not saying you should not be asking positive questions. Again, asking questions like, tell me about one situation where you failed. Tell me about one situation where you fought with a superior or with a subordinate. Tell me one experience where the consumer experience did not go as you had imagined. Asking those questions are very revelatory, is because either people will give you fake answers, like, I'm very driven, that's my weakness. I mean, they'll give you those kind of answers. Or it will actually truly reveal that how do they perform when things don't go according to plan. And that, I think, is the most revealing part of people at any level that you're hiring. Because most of the time our focus usually in interviews is to take out the best out of that person, and which you should set up the interview like that. It should not feel like that you're only asking about their failures. But those are, for me, are the most revealing question. When I ask them those questions, and if their answers are like, oh, I've never failed, or none of my projections have gone wrong, or it hasn't gone wrong and you know that if you worked enough, and if you're not failed enough, then either you're lying or you have been hiding behind somebody else, and that's why the failure probably does not point to you. So for me, those are the revealing question that really shows the character of an individual.
I love that. I want to ask you about a memorable interview experience, but I want to be very specific. I'd like to know about the first employee that you interviewed. What was that like? You were getting them to jump on your rocket ship when there was nothing there. Tell me about that interview, and like, how did you get the person interested in the role, and how did you know you had the right person? Because that first employee is a really important one.
Yeah, so it is. Yeah, that takes me back several years, of course, and I interviewed this very first individual, and it was judging from both the ends. I mean, I was tiny office, like 100 square feet, maybe just one desk. So this girl who walks in, I'm sure she was probably interviewing me more than I was interviewing her, because I mean, I really have no business, no for me to be hiring her. So of course she was probably looking at it. But my entire thing to her, what I was looking for really, I mean, or what I came out of, or out of that experience, I would not call it interviewing, but interaction, was the fact that she was very honest, she was very transparent, and one thing a couple of things that she mentioned that told me that uh, she would do anything that's required to deliver on this job. Her entire thing wasn't about I'm hotshot or I've done great jobs in the past. Her entire thing was, it was very genuine to the point that, look, I'll get things done, whatever it takes. And you could, even though those are not the exact words, you could figure out from the conversation. And again, that goes all the way back to culture, even from hiring the very first employee, so to say, is that's a culture that I saw. And then why I knew that this was the probably the best hire I'll ever make is a funny story. Is a week or two after she had joined, she realized that I wasn't making too much money, and she comes to me and she is like, "I'm currently on unemployment benefit, and that pays me like $2,500 a month or something. And I don't think you're making enough money to pay me, so I can stay on unemployment and can still work for you for free because I'm making some unemployment money but already." And I'm like, "How do you get that kind of loyalty?" And she was like, "I believe in you. I believe what your vision is. And so until you start making money, I'm happy to do it." Of course, I did not agree to that. But what I'm telling you is that you could realize from that moment, from that conversation, as probably funny it was, is the fact that somebody is really dedicated and committed to your vision, even though there's probably no money to be made, at least not in the short run. So, like, I believe that you will achieve everything that you want to, but I also know that you're not really because she is now part of the business. She knows that I'm not really making much money here, and she offered me that. So I'll take that as, I mean, that moment of gratitude has stayed all these years of hiring that individual. But I think that's the interaction during the interview where it was very, very clear that whatever her skills level were, she was fully committed to the role. And this entire interaction after a couple of weeks told me that I had probably hired the best individual that I ever could.
Wow, what a story. I was worried there that the California Department of Labor was going to give me a call on unemployment benefits, but what an incredible sign of the loyalty. And look, it's paid off for her. I'm sure she's,
Yes.
with you and growing with you, and then she took a bet and it looks like it's worked out. So I'm really, really excited about that. What about when you miss on somebody? I know you're going to go culture here. So tell me, what do you miss about, because you said that interview, 30, 45 minutes, can be very tough to kind of get a full deep insight into somebody, right? So when you've missed, is there maybe a theme on what you've missed that you unfortunately have to let that person go?
Yeah, one of the misses that one of I think also comes from preconceived notion. I went to a business school, worked for GE in my first job, so I had a lot of things about your resume, especially early in my career. I think, oh, how strong is your resume is probably drives how good of an employee you are. And when I say how is strong a resume, I mean the brands on your resume, what companies you have worked for. And I think I got blindsided with that several times until I realized and when I say several times, probably two or three times, where people, and of course, I'll not take the names because that's one employee is not, does not indicate that everyone who works there are not good. But I've had that in the past where people came from much bigger brands than ours. And I was like, oh, that's a no brainer. If they have worked for that company, they must be really good at what they have done. And that has been a mistake that probably I repeated two or three times, where I just went with and I actually kept the interview much shorter, is because I was like, what is there to interview this person? This person is leaving a much bigger organization to come work with us. And it became so much so that after that point, I became extremely circumspect about hiring from much bigger brands, is because what I realized as a pattern is that we had a very, very different culture where everybody was empowered, everybody was taking decision. It wasn't a culture of blaming and complaining. And when people come from bigger brands, they somehow feel entitled. And again, this is not a story for everyone, but some people feel entitled because they had certain benefits, or they would work from 9 to 5, and this is what their work culture looks like. And it was a complete misfit into what we were trying to do here, what our culture looked like. And if anything, it was destroying what already existed in the organization. So I think that just having that preconceived notion of people who have worked for bigger brands are somehow superior, um, compared to, say, people who have worked for smaller brands. I think that just came from my education, and from the first company that I worked with. I was like, oh, you work for GE, you must be really good at what you're doing. And I think that I've learned sometimes. In fact, some of my best employees came from almost non-recognizable brands, and they have done exceedingly well. Is because they just have more fire in their bellies. They're willing to work harder. They have just much stronger, more like a family culture, so to say. That's how they treat the organization.
Yeah, we do the same thing with universities. We make assumptions because you
Yes.
graduated from this place that you
Yes.
can do X. And the irony is that the companies that you're talking about have gotten to the point where they've become well recognized, but you might not have, been as impressed when that company was on its way up. And yet there's not a bigger jump, in my opinion, in going from a large bureaucratic enterprise environment to a startup, because what's required of you in those two different environments can be two more different things. So that is a great pattern you called out there, and one that I've seen in my career as well. My last question for you comes around the role of technology, right? When it comes to interviewing and hiring. Do you use any technology when it comes to hiring? Is it pen and paper? Is it just, sitting there in the moment? Tell me what you might use in terms of technology when it comes to the hiring experience for your company.
Yeah, so we don't do a lot of technology from a hiring perspective. We have a few stuff that we do on due diligence. That's more hiring. We also sometimes use case studies from hiring perspective, depending on which roles we are hiring for. For example, underwriting in mortgages is a pretty big deal. You get one thing wrong, and that could be potentially big financial loss. So we sometimes will have underwriters do like a real life case study on some of the underwriting scenarios that we will work on. But and then there are a couple of technologies which are specific to the mortgage industry in terms of being able to understand what their past looked like, what their work history looked like, which is very, very specific to the industry that we subscribe to, and we work with that. Other than that, then our entire onboarding, of course, we work on a technology platform that works through the entire onboarding. We have built something ourselves, especially with InstaAI has an entire onboarding platform, and then we use a lot of features inside Gusto from an accounting and recruiting and hiring onboarding perspective. So that's probably what our tech stack looks like right now, both from the time of prospecting all the way to onboarding them.
I love that. Remind me, we got to talk about AI, and I got some ideas for you on how you can leverage AI in that space as well. Shashank, I've really enjoyed the conversation. This has been fantastic. Thank you for spending some time with us. I'm really looking forward to getting to know you even better. And hopefully next time I'm in California, or if you're in South Florida, we can get together in person. Okay.
Absolutely, we will.
All right, Shashank. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Oz.